Have you ever had this happen before where you're playing a piece of music, you're playing a beautiful melody, you're on one string, playing with the bow, and then all of a sudden you accidentally play the other string? Maybe you're on the A string playing a beautiful melody and you accidentally hit the E string. Or maybe you're on the A string and you accidentally hit the D string. Playing multiple strings at once is a beautiful part of violin playing, and sometimes we mean to do it, like in this piece by Bach. But other times, it happens on total accident. And understanding how to do it on purpose helps us understand why we're doing it on accident and how to avoid it. Hello fellow instrumentalists, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Jacques Gadway and this is Gadway Violin. In today's video we're going over 4 reasons why you're accidentally playing an extra string. And the last of these reasons is one that most people don't even know about. But first, let's start with the first reason, which is a pretty common one. The first reason that you're accidentally playing more than one string is because your elbow is simply not on the correct string level. For the purpose of this video, whenever I talk about string level, what I mean is the level that your arm and bow needs to be in order to play a specific string. So, because there's 4 strings on the violin, we're going to act as though there are 4 string levels. In reality, there's going to be more string levels than that as we get into the fine details of the 3-dimensional space of our strings, but for simplicity's sake, we're going to talk as if there are only 4 string levels: G string level, D string level, A string level, and of course the final E string level. In general, the higher pitched the string is, the easier the string level is to maintain. The E string is rather comfortable. It's when our arm is the lowest. The G string, on the other hand, is going to be the least comfortable. It's when our arm needs to be the highest. Now, understanding this, one of the reasons you might be playing more than one string at a time accidentally is because you're simply moving in and out of a string level. When you play a down bow, for the duration of that down bow, if it's to be on one string, it's important to maintain that string level. If you're playing a down bow entirely on an A string, it's important to try your best to maintain that string level. Now, how do we fully conceptualize this idea of string level? From this angle, you can see that our arm and bow are intrinsically linked. If we're moving from the G string to the E string, our arm is moving from high to low. Every single string level, we're going to start with the G string for demonstration, we're going to try and keep our upper arm, our forearm, and our bow on that same level. One reason why you might be playing an extra string unintentionally is because while playing a down bow, for example, your string level might be changing from a G string to a D string. Sometimes it might not be as extreme as that. Sometimes you simply might just be breaking down or up out of a string level. Let's take one of the middle strings to show both examples of breaking up and down out of the string level. So if we take the D string, for example, we're on the D string level. When we play our down bow, we can break out of the string level by going down, or we can break out of the string level by going up and accidentally playing the G string. One way to conceptualize these string levels is to think about the shapes that your arm is making as you play from the frog to the tip. We can break our bow into 3 main shapes. At the frog, we have what Galamian might have called triangle. This is called that because we make a triangle out of our forearm, our upper arm, and the line that the string and violins make. It's easier to see perhaps on the E string. We have square, which is when we're at the middle of the bow, and once again we're drawing that shape with the upper arm, the forearm, and this time we're including the bow, and then of course the same line of the violin. And then we have when we bring our bow all the way to the tip, and I'll stand for this to make it clear, and I like to call this long triangle. I think Galamian just called it point, but to me it seems like we're breaking out of the pattern when we call it point. Let's call them all shapes. So I call this long triangle because our upper arm and forearm almost make a straight line. Yours might actually, but my arm is kind of long, so it doesn't fully straighten. Our bow makes another straight line, and then again we still have that same upper line that's created from the actual shape of the violin and our shoulders. So in order to help conceptualize this, I drew all of these shapes roughly and probably terribly on this piece of paper or this envelope. The green is our triangle, the blue is our square, and the red is our long triangle. And one way to think about string level is to think of string level as being the paper that these shapes are drawn on. So if we play on the G string, these shapes are going to be drawn on a paper that is angled for the G string. And if we play on the D string, these shapes are going to be drawn on a paper that's on the level of the D string, and so forth. So think about these shapes as being drawn on the string level. So when we draw the bow, no matter what shape we're making, they have to be on that string level or on that piece of paper. All right, let's go on to reason number 2. The second reason that you might be accidentally striking an extra string is because you may be over-pronating. What I mean by that is in our bow hold, we can either supinate or pronate. Supination is the rotation of the hand that is towards the pinky. So if you're looking at your own hand, that rotation is going to be clockwise. If you're looking at your own hand, that pronation, that rotation is going to be counterclockwise. If you overly pronate to the point where your hand almost becomes perpendicular with the bow, this kind of pronation makes the actual motion of the bow being drawn very difficult to understand and comprehend, which means that rather than being able to be drawn in the string level, there's a tendency for the up and down motion to be drawn in and out of the string level, or down and up, which, as we know from our demonstrations from the previous example, cause us to strike additional strings. In general, we want to try and supinate a little bit so that our fingers are not so angled, but are actually a little bit closer to neutral or perpendicular. We don't want them to be totally perpendicular, but we want them to be a little bit sharper of an angle towards the bow. And with this kind of supination, this allows the wrist and hand to be in a more neutral position. You can see that the top of my hand and the kind of side of my forearm are aligned, so that the opening and closing of my elbow is in line with that kind of karate chop motion. If we pronate too much, it becomes more of this palm down motion. And this is confusing for the hand, because no matter what, when you pronate, you're not actually going to ever be in this palm down motion, which means that if you conceptualize your bow in this kind of palm down motion, that you're likely to move in and out of that elbow closing, and therefore in and out of your string level, which can cause you to hit additional strings. Reason number 3 why you might be hitting an extra string when you're playing is because you are not using your sounding point properly. If you often hit extra strings when you play, one of the most probable causes is that your sounding point is too far away from the bridge. As you get closer to the bridge on your instrument, the strings become further away from each other, and they actually each have a greater difference in height. What this means is that your bow actually has more room to play. The D string level, for example, has way more variety in it where you can stay on the D string. As you get further from the bridge, the string heights become more uniform, and so it becomes very easy to play multiple strings at a time. In fact, if you get far enough away from the bridge, and you play with even a little bit of force on the D string or A string level, it's quite possible to play all 4 strings of the violin at once. It's not going to sound super great. In fact, you can get the same effect by playing a little bit harder and closer to the bridge with a little more clarity. But you can actually sustain 3 strings at once over the fingerboard. Doesn't sound great, but it's not hard to do. And if it's not hard to do, that means that it can certainly happen by accident. So simply bringing the bow closer to the bridge can make it a lot harder to play extra notes. Finally, the 4th and final reason that you might be accidentally playing extra strings when you play is because you might be changing your posture. This is something I see all the time, and it's something that people don't think about when they're worried about their bow. But actually, your posture affects your bow technique drastically. Think about it this way. When you practice your bow with a specific posture, you're learning how to play in that posture. If you then go ahead and change that posture, it's going to change your ability to play. It's kind of like taking free throws in basketball and then someone goes and moves the hoop while you're playing. Let's actually demonstrate this so we can see what I'm talking about. What I often see is someone will practice their bowing, doing fairly well with a nice straight bow, on the D string, keeping their string level. Maybe they'll even just practice open strings. If I change nothing about the way that I'm bowing, and I just bring my violin over, this is something I see people do because they bring the violin over to look at their fingers better. All of a sudden, if I don't change my bow, we're no longer straight. We're actually no longer really on the D string. It's simply not going to work. So in order to accommodate the new posture, we actually have to make changes to our bow. But now, everything that we practice over here does not translate directly to being over here. So we're adding up new work and we're causing ourselves problems. So in your practice, be mindful of your posture. I know it's not the most exciting thing about playing violin, but it's definitely one of the most important, especially when you're still at the stage where you're trying to develop a good straight bow. With that, that gives us all 4 of my reasons why you are playing extra strings by accident on your violin. If there's a reason that you know of that I didn't list, please leave them down below in the comments so I can learn and all of us here in the Gadway violin community can see. And as always, if you like what you saw, please like this video and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a future one. Thanks so much for watching and happy practicing.